Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for watching. I'm Matt Reardon. We're looking at a radar loop here to start. These are the severe storms. We saw a lot of hail and wind reports from southern Ohio through West Virginia yesterday evening, and then finally pushing across the state of Virginia in the overnight. Playing that loop again overnight tonight. I think that's a nice kind of segue into what we're really looking at a more active pattern in the central U.S. picking up really kind of later this week and then into the weekend. Really all the way portions, maybe the southern plains, all the way up toward the Midwest and even into the mid-south at times. So we'll look at that as well. I want to talk about planting conditions as well, really kind of across portions of the Midwest, heading into the Western Corn Belt, Eastern Corn Belt now. I'm expecting here Tuesday, Wednesday with some of the winds picking up, temperatures staying on the mild side, and a lack of precip. We'll talk about that. I think planting, we could see it pick up in a big way here just over the next 48 hours or so from what I'm seeing. After that, I've been getting quite a few questions here this spring, I think understandably so, about the temperature forecast this summer. We've talked a lot about drought. We're going to continue to talk about the potential for those precipitation deficits as we get into the summer months here. We'll be unpacking that kind of as we go. But I think it's a fair question to say, well, what more exclusively about temperature, what we might be looking at, because we know temperature matters in terms of water stress on the crop, just as much as precipitation, although, rainfall gets, our big priority most of the time. So I want to take a deep dive into that, look to history kind of as a guide there and paint a picture of what we might be seeing going forward, at least in terms of temperatures and how that might influence, right? If we're dealing with drought, what kind of temperatures are we going to get on top of it? So that's near the end of this video here, the planning forecast and the severe weather more so toward the beginning if you want to skip around to different parts here. I do want to jump over and show this. This is the accumulation of hail reports this year in 2025. That's in green. It's hard to see because we've kind of been tracking the climatological average on this chart from the Storm Prediction Center, and that is in this black color here. Now I'm showing this because of that drought conversation. I earlier this spring mentioned that big drought years 2012 and 2011. We actually saw more hail reports in those years. And we think there might be this connection between mid-level dry air, perhaps associated with some drought in the central or southwestern U.S., with hail formations, kind of ongoing research. And it's curious if you look on this chart here, the past roughly 15 years or so are on here. In this red dotted line, that's 2011. That is our kind of banner year, at least in the last 30 to 40 years for severe weather in the U.S. And you can see just even hail, tornado, wind reports included. It's just every other year is so much further below it. But curiously enough, the next year down from 2011, where we saw a lot of southern plains droughts trying to get up into the Midwest at the peak of summer, the next year down is 2012, right in that green dotted line. Now, 2025, we are tracking, again, closer to normal. Now, with the flurry of activity in late March and early April here, we've picked up a bit. And then the reports, as they're kind of added here overnight, I think we'll see another tick up. And then with the severe weather we're potentially expecting later this week, quite a bit of southern plains activity later. I think we're going to be inching up here. So it's kind of curious to watch how this year, I think, compares to those. Another thing we'll be keeping an eye on here. If we just look at all the hail reports observed across this year, I mean, we've been closer to average. We were above it at times, but it's been a quick start. I mean, this map is not lacking for hail reports, and I'd expect this to continue, right, while we continue to see some of the dryness further to our southwest and our immediate west. Now, if we looked across the U.S. today, this is just infrared satellite. Again, recording this about 6 a.m. Central Time, so right before the sun's coming up here. Not too much to talk about. That's kind of the theme of this week. We're still in this, Eric and I have been mentioning this kind of week off, week on pattern. We're still kind of in this week off here, so not too much precipitation to talk about. We do have some here this morning. We have this low pressure system moving through the Great Lakes area and some rain and snow showers kind of mixing in here to Michigan, trying to get into northern Indiana at this point. Then lingering showers with that front from the severe weather that we saw overnight. Otherwise, fairly quiet. Some other light returns here across the southern plains. I will say across the Midwest here this morning, and this is evident just kind of listening to the wind outside my window here in central Illinois, is that the winds have been up overnight. That's likely to continue here today for much of the Midwest portions of the central U.S. as that low is sneaking through here. And you can see that all the way connected up toward Hudson Bay here. I do want to briefly mention the wind forecast as it kind of continues forward. These are the cumulative maximum gusts from the GFS, so they're just only going to accumulate as a higher value comes in. As I take this forecast into, let's get it out into Tuesday proper, I'm going to see winds pick up here through the day here in portions of Kansas and Oklahoma. Pretty quiet across the Midwest. As we get into tomorrow, this is now out to 7 p.m. Now Wednesday here. So tomorrow, likely looking at a calming of the winds here across the Midwest. But waiting later in the week, and this kind of segues us into the precipitation conversation in just a few slides here, but expecting systems to come out of the southern plains. We've kind of been watching and waiting for this, and we're finally getting our first hints of that at the end of the forecast here. And it's really now Thursday midday that we see winds pick up more significantly here across portions of New Mexico, Colorado, West Texas as well. That system's going to make its way across the Midwest as we go through the day on Thursday, and then Friday you can see winds pick up in association with that, and then some precipitation chances follow that. So there is this corridor of higher winds here coming later in the week, and I believe wind advisories, if not high wind warnings, have now been posted for portions of New Mexico in anticipation of that. Now, in terms of temperatures, keeping an eye on frost this year, if we just look at the temperatures here this morning, forecast from the National Weather Service down into the 20s across portions of Nebraska, Dakotas, getting even into Kansas. And let's just go see how they did here. Let's pull up those current temperatures here this morning because they're likely at their lowest. They're going to be here about 6 a.m. Central. And sure enough, yeah, those forecasts looked fairly accurate here, with temperatures down into the low 20s, getting into the freezing in western Kansas, definitely down in the mid to low 20s in the Dakotas here. So good forecast here from the National Weather Service, at least as it relates to the bottoming out of those temperatures here this morning. I'm going to jump back and let's play that forecast out into the future that we were just looking at, because that cold is going to be shifting east as those winds die down tonight that we were just talking about across the Midwest. Seeing that frost risk pick up in the Midwest tomorrow. Low temperatures now getting into the low 30s here across portions of Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan. That freezing line likely staying north of I-80. You can see portions of southern Wisconsin getting into Michigan. Below that, we're into the mid-30s. But certainly with those calmer winds overnight, I'd expect a decent frost chance here across portions of the I-74, I-70 corridor here. Now, after that, as we get into Thursday and Friday, we're going to see this warming trend, even potentially as we go through the day Wednesday. Picking on Davenport, Iowa here. This is the Quad Cities here in eastern Iowa, northwest Illinois. We're looking at soil temperature at 4 inches here, this forecast from the ECMWF. And you can see the soil temperature is increasing above 50 degrees Fahrenheit in that root zone here. Few, if any, rain chances out until at least kind of Thursday to Friday in Iowa here. So you're seeing this kind of, again, this brief window picking up here where we have decently low soil moistures, soil temperatures are picking up. Expecting with some of the activity that soil temperatures will be reducing along with some precipitation here over the weekend, but not quite getting down into that, right into the 30s here significantly, and then potentially rebounding next week. So wouldn't be surprised if areas kind of further south than I-80, maybe even getting up close there, we see more activity in the fields. I think another way to view this is at least looking at NASA soil moisture estimates. This is just that top layer of the soil here, and you can see this kind of drying out that we've seen over the past week here in that 10-day off kind of period. We're running up to the end of that now, so that's kind of week on, week off. We're heading out of the week off, getting back onto the week on, probably about Thursday for much of the central U.S. And so you can see that rainfall that came through yesterday and these soil moisture estimates here. This is valid as of today. But drying out further, again, that kind of I-74 corridor all the way up toward I-80 and then areas further to the south, at least west of Indiana, and maybe northern Indiana as well. Now, I mentioned we're kind of heading into the last few days of that week off pattern. I'm going to take this 3-kilometer NAM forecast out, this higher resolution for the precipitation forecast. I'm going to play this into, let's get a Tuesday AM, valid as of this morning. See those showers that we talked about in Michigan, some snow mixing in here. Captures well those kind of lingering showers that we saw across portions of the Appalachians. I'm going to play this forward. Tuesday evening, that system exiting further to the west, more snow showers in upstate New York, western Pennsylvania. But really not too much to talk about across much of the central U.S., even the western U.S. as well. Areas of western northern Montana potentially looking at some snow on Wednesday afternoon. But we're just waiting for this next system here to come off the continental divide. So you can see it trying to spin up here in portions of Nebraska, South Dakota. So take this forecast now all the way out to Thursday morning. And now Thursday lunchtime central. Now the end of the forecast here Thursday afternoon. You can see precipitation picking up here across the northern Corn Belt and waiting. See some showers here, western Wisconsin, northern Iowa, waiting to see if we see some severe thunderstorm activity or showers on the leading edge of the storm system. Now, it doesn't have a lot of moisture to work with it because it's the first one coming through. That's not uncommon, but waiting and watching here Thursday afternoon to see what the precipitation and storm coverage is going to look like. There could be a hail threat associated with this overnight and Thursday, potentially kind of a conditional supercell threat in Iowa that we'll be keeping an eye on. Let's take this forecast forward from the ECMWF instead. I want to get out to that Thursday time period. You can see by lunchtime Thursday, the ECMWF is more aggressive on producing showers out ahead of the system. You can see this one a little bit further back, a little bit stronger on the ECMWF, and actually get some showers and potential storms going in Missouri, western Illinois by lunchtime on Thursday. Iowa included, obviously Minnesota, we just talked about that. So this window, if it's opening here Tuesday into tomorrow on Wednesday, could be closing as early as Wednesday at lunchtime in portions of the Central Corn Belt. There are some questions on storm coverage. I think Thursday, it wouldn't shock me if we're waiting all the way through Thursday and then into the evening for some of the storms to fire across portions of Iowa or Illinois. So that's something to keep in mind. So storm coverage picks up as we go through the night on Thursday into early Friday. You can see the system kind of parking itself over Iowa here. Broad showers here over portions of the upper Midwest, some snow on the back side of this. So I take this forward, this lead low, if you will, shoots through the Midwest here. This is Friday evening. And then late Friday, expecting renewed thunderstorm and shower development along this kind of elongated, what we call pressure trough. There's a front associated with this as well. So there's a low pressure system up here. There's kind of another little mini one here, another one back here over Oklahoma. That's what we call it, a pressure trough, just a saddle point of low pressure here, stretching across the Midwest into the Central Plains. This is now Saturday, very early at 1 a.m. Central. Activity continues in the overnight, pushing through much of now the Ohio River Valley, all the way through Missouri, even back into Oklahoma. This is Saturday at lunchtime. Saturday afternoon, you can see again, all along this front, potential showers and storms, and there will be at least some severe threat with this. Now, as we go into Sunday, now we get a more defined low pressure system coming off here in western Oklahoma. Sunday afternoon, continue to see widespread shower, potential thunderstorm activity here across portions of Missouri, Nebraska, Iowa, getting into Illinois now Sunday evening. And that system shoots off up into the upper Midwest, likely now looking at showers and storms moving through early Monday morning, likely not to be as strong, right, in those morning hours before that system now exits. And as we get into the next week, potentially more systems to talk about with showers and storms. So that sounded like a broken record. We're looking at, kind of starting Thursday, precipitation chances really across much of the central U.S., extending all the way out into next week. I'm a week out at this point. We're still seeing another one of these systems come through. Just kind of for fun, I'll let that one play through. And you can see that system exits out by Wednesday, potentially looking at another one on the backside of this. So entering an active pattern here. We just look at the 7-day forecast from the WPC. Not a surprise that kind of pressure trough that I mentioned, right, it extended kind of up like that. And really where the organization of those low pressure systems were kicking off, you can see more precipitation values here. So Oklahoma City over toward Tulsa, Joplin, Springfield, Missouri, down toward St. Louis, looking at 2 inches plus of rainfall. And even extending that back toward Amarillo and Lubbock at times, you can see those precipitation values creeping up toward that quarter-inch line. But we'll be watching where this kind of dry line sets up and where these storm systems really get kick off and get going. You can imagine there's a severe threat associated with this. We'll talk about that in just a second. And if we look at a different opinion here from the ECMWF, again, kind of Tulsa, Joplin, Springfield area, looking at potential 8-day rainfall totals up over 2.5 to 3 inches here. So wide area of the central portion of the country, looking at an area of an inch or more of rain. Starting this Thursday, multiple rain and storm chances all the way out right to Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. Now, the reason we're seeing this activity, we've been kind of waiting and watching during this off period for western U.S. troughs. If I take this forecast out to Thursday, April 17th, see this elongated trough here. It's really kind of a 3-part system, and they're not all talking to one another. And what I mean by that is this one kind of has a mind of its own. The central one may be the strongest, and then this cutoff low near California. These two merge. They're going to hang out together and kind of wait back on Friday. This lead wave is not going to what we call phase with these two. It kind of has a mind of its own. So it shoots off first Thursday into early Friday, which is why this one has some more question marks to it. It's kind of weaker, it's moving quicker, which is why we have more question marks on that Thursday storm coverage. As that one exits through on Friday and then into early Saturday morning, waiting for this next system in this trough to kick off over the southern plains. This is more so on Sunday, which is why we saw that better organization of that low pressure system down here. Before that quickly races through the Midwest, bringing renewed shower and storm chances on early Monday. And then we have another system coming in behind it through the upper Midwest on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week again, and then more troughing potentially behind it. Storm Prediction Center has a slight risk out for portions of eastern Nebraska, Iowa, northern Missouri. This is on Thursday afternoon, evening. Again, some question of storm coverage here. When do these storms develop? Is it kind of mid-afternoon or is it later into the evening? My gut says It's going to take a while to get sufficient moisture, and we could be waiting later into the evening for some potential supercells with a hail threat to develop here in Iowa, but something to keep an eye on certainly on Thursday evening. We go out to day 4 on Friday, again along that pressure trough, potential storm systems to keep track of here on Friday. If we go into Saturday, very similar signature here across portions of the southern plains extending up toward the Ohio River Valley. And then finally, with a more defined organization on Sunday of that low pressure system, right, we see a more organized, defined area of potential storm concern that the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted here across Arkansas, kind of the Arklatex, Texarkana area. Now, beyond that, getting us through Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we know we're looking at an active pattern. And I'm looking at the ECMWF AIFS, the trough and ridge pattern here at 500 millibars. I'm going to take this forecast quickly. I'm not going to rehash everything we just discussed, but I want to get out to Thursday of next week. This is April 24th now. We're starting to see ridging developing back here over the central and eastern U.S. This is a pattern we've kind of been watching and waiting for to get kind of your classic plains or central U.S. severe chances going again. If I take this forecast now out into Friday the 25th, now Saturday, April 26th, we see that ridging now moving more so over the Mississippi River Valley. We see pronounced troughing now moving in over California. This would potentially bring rain chances back to Northern California and Oregon if it comes true. We're well out in the forecast here, right? We're all the way Saturday, April 26th. We're getting beyond kind of that 10-day time horizon. But this is the pattern that we've been watching and waiting for extended severe weather risks across this portion of the country here in the central U.S., potentially precipitation as well in some of the areas of dryness that we've been concerned about. And as I take this forecast forward, you can see now by 28th and the 29th of April, late April, these systems coming through, and this would bring widespread severe rain, or I should say severe storms, and then rain chances obviously associated with that as well. So the pattern that we've kind of been watching and waiting for in late April certainly seems to be coming to fruition, with looking active here Thursday through next week, but potentially after that, even out toward next weekend. Don't see a reason that this activity could stop, which means that this kind of window that we're in now, right, could be, kind of the last obvious one. Now, if we're warm, if we're windy, as some of these systems come through in the central U.S. or in the Ohio River Valley, these small windows could open up through late April. But chances right now for a clear, widespread 4 to 5 day one it just doesn't seem to be in the cards. We have the 8 to 14 day outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. I should say this is the 22nd through the 28th. You can see the influence of that ridge across the central and eastern U.S. with well above temperatures expected in the southeast. Precipitation outlook, you can see well above now on that kind of same area that we highlighted. Again, 8 to 14 days, the end of April here. Based on that pattern, don't expect to see anything else other than above average precipitation across kind of a corridor here. I will say, with the ridging developing across the eastern and the central U.S. at times, keeping an eye down here. If we get some of these warm temperatures early here in late April, early May, and we miss out on some of these precipitation chances, if you saw that behavior where some of these were kind of racing up quickly into the Midwest or skirting across the northern plains into the upper Midwest, that leaves some of these areas a little bit drier during this next, if you will, on period. I think we could see some of that drought reemerge across the southeast, or at least entrench itself further. So just something I'm watching here over the next few days. If we look at temperature, frost and freeze risk here, I'm going to take this quickly into Wednesday morning. We talked about this. This is the ECMWF ensemble probability of 32 degrees Fahrenheit or below. See those kind of creeping back up near I-80 here on Wednesday morning. So take this forecast forward, you can see it moving off into the mid-Atlantic, upstate New York, Pennsylvania, eastern Iowa here. This is on Thursday morning, April 17th, Michigan included. So you get beyond that, now Friday, Saturday, so you see some cold air on the backside of the systems coming through this weekend in the northern plains and the upper Midwest. Continues through the upper Midwest on Sunday morning, that colder air. But watching and waiting after that as these systems come through, and I'm going pretty quickly all the way out through the end of April here, and don't see a defined frost and freeze signal really getting into anywhere here in the Midwest through that next week. And that makes sense with that ridging that we just talked about. As I wrap up here, I mentioned I want to do this deep dive on temperatures. I'm going to do this here because I've gotten a lot of these questions lately. We've been showing maps like this a lot of spring. Eric's been talking about it. We've been looking at the drought risk and potential for 2025. We talked about all the reasons for that, and we'll continue to do so. Today, I want to talk more about this temperature conversation because as we've shown maps like this from the National Multi-Model Ensemble, this is the precipitation departure from average, and you can see the wide swaths of deficit forecasted here from NMME over the central plains, northern plains, getting all the way over to the Midwest, the upper Midwest as well. this is obviously something to be concerned about, but we have to think about the temperatures with that, because that can modulate the drought impact to the crop just as much as anything else. Now, if we jump over and look at the NMME temperature departures, you can see the positive values here across much of those same areas where the drought is expected to be at its worst. Now, this scenario from the NMME, because the high temperatures are overlaced, if you will, with some of those stronger precipitation deficits, would be there'd be much more water stress associated with this if this came through, especially during pollination, right? The impact to yield is going to be that much stronger. So this scenario from the NMME is probably the one I'm more concerned about. They're not all like this, at least in terms of the Western Corn Belt and where the worst of the heat is forecast. If you look at this, the Climate Prediction Center, their forecast for June, July, August, they have it more entrenched across the Intermountain West. It's kind of ridging out to the west, some heat here in the southeast and Maine as well. Now, this forecast is always tricky, and it's been getting trickier, I think, over the last kind of 5, 6, 7 years. If I just show you the average temperature anomalies of the last 5 years, 2020 through 2024, for June, July, August, it looks very similar to what the Climate Prediction Center just forecasted on that slide before. So we see where they're predicting the most above average temperatures for the summer is where we've been over the last 5 years. We've been warm in the west. Had that warmth come over into the northern plains, the southern plains at times. We saw drought associated with some of this at times. In the east, we've been cooler in the summer months. In the west, we've been warmer. And forecasting summer temperatures in California, it's almost like you have to convince me over the last 5 years that I'm looking for any reason to say it's not going to be warmer than average, at least compared to the 1990 to 2020 normals data that we're comparing this to. That's where these contours are produced from, at least on this map here. Now, we've gotten lucky at times, I think, in some of these high production areas. If we look at June over that same time period, 2020 to 2024, so we were just looking at June, July, August. Now we're just focusing on June. We've had hot Junes across the Midwest. Imagine 2023, really through much of the ice state area. But really, June has been on the warmer side. Where we've gotten lucky is that once we've gotten to pollination, soybeans in July and August, we've comparatively cooled that off. So this is now excluding June, looking at just in July and August, and that is when the heat has shifted west. So my question is, if we're going to be warmer than average this summer, that's helpful to know, but I want to know the pattern. Are we going to peak in July, or is it going to peak in June, as it has kind of predictably over the last 5 years at times? And that's going to matter for the crop. I think, a good example here, if I take you back to 2012, Decatur, Illinois, obviously the drought kind of entrenched over this area. We're looking at the whole year temperature pattern, and you can see the kind of daily average temperature. And what I want you to keep an eye on here for Decatur is that the peak of those summer temperatures was in early June and the middle of July. So kind of June to August on this chart here is in this window here. And what we can see here is what we call this kind of inverted V that we're worried about in summer in terms of the temperature pattern. So Decatur in 2012, so the warmest temperatures right during pollination, right after July 1st through the holiday weekend, and then the weeks after. June, comparatively, a little bit cooler. August, comparatively, a little bit colder as well, which is why we see this kind of upside-down U or inverted V associated with this. Now, if I take you to a much cooler year with more precipitation in July and August, we actually see, not an inverted V, but this M. See this M here where we were warm in June, similar to how we've been in 2020 to 2024. We were warm in August. The warmth in June might not necessarily be a bad thing if we get some GDDs on the crop. And then during pollination, we had this cooling off period. And obviously, the crops benefited from that, especially with some cooler overnight temperatures at times as well. If I look at kind of a little bit different case here in Garden City, Kansas, this is 2011, kind of at the epicenter of some of that drought there. Very warm temperatures in July, really the whole month of July. And it's not quite an inverted V, but it's definitely this upside down U here, where the hottest temperatures of the summer were right during that July and early August time period. In fact, the red kind of line on this chart are the maximum temperatures over the whole record here. So from 1956 all the way out to 2025. And we hit a lot of those records in this year of 2011. You can actually see the records being set. Now, if we jump over, again, that 2014, the cooler year across the central U.S., you can see that M show up again. So watching and waiting. Are we going to be warm this summer because we're warm in June and warm in July, but cool or warm in June, warm in August, but cool in July? That's a very different kind of crop that we're growing than if we're going to be warm right at the kind of peak of the heating and the peak of pollination. Now, the ECMWF seasonal forecast, as we get into May and then June, it does advertise some of that heat over some of the areas of dryness that we've been concerned about: Oklahoma, Kansas, southern Nebraska. I'm going to take this forecast into July. Where is this heat going at the peak of summer? Well, we can see it staying over the Intermountain West, portions of Montana, perhaps staying in portions of the southern plains here, not getting out over into the Midwest as much. If I take it into August, again, really staying more over the Continental Divide, eastern Montana, far western Dakota. Obviously, this wouldn't be a great forecast in this area of the country, but kind of similar to that pattern that we've seen in 2020 to 2024, where this area in July and August has gone cooler. Now, the ECMWF forecast, we've scrutinized this at time, Eric and I, because if we look at some of the sea surface temperatures, if we go May, June, July, and August from ECMWF, it has been very warm in the eastern Pacific. And I keep an eye on that, because if you want to get the central part of the country hot in July, this area needs to turn cold. So if we look at 2012, right, that same time period we looked at Decatur with the inverted V across the middle part of the country, look how cold we were in this corridor here in the eastern Pacific. Well, what about 2011, where that heat was centered more so over the drought in the southern plains? We just looked at Garden City, Kansas. Cold in the eastern Pacific. So with the ECMWF bringing more of that heat toward the eastern Pacific, we're seeing more of that kind of peak July, August heat centered more so west or more so over the western or high plains here. So I'm going to be watching this closely. If this ECMWF forecast comes to fruition, my concern for, I guess, Midwest or eastern Corn Belt heat will comparatively lessen, but I have a lot of doubts about this forecast right now. Even looking at the June temperature pattern here, right, this is an area we just looked at. It's going to be active here through late April and early May. If we get a lot of precipitation here, right, we're going to see those same model biases that we saw over the Ohio River Valley. So definitely some forks in the road here. Not sold on this ECMWF temperature forecast. I think if we stay warm over in the eastern Pacific as it expects, at least as this model expects, right, it's going to modulate the temperature concerns over the Corn Belt here. Keeping an eye on where that's going. We'll look at some of the other forecasts as they come through here. And then we're going to be thinking about that drought conversation as well. My concern would be something more akin to the NMME that I showed just a few slides ago. Let's see if we can pull that up. Where we stay cold in the eastern Pacific, and we start to see that heat in July and August. Now, we don't get that kind of monthly forecast from the NMME. I'll have to take you back. And let's go all the way back, and we can select, see if we can get a further out forecast here from the... So we take this all the way out to July, August, September, right? Getting out later into the summer months here, you can see that heat still, again, over the northern plains and the western Corn Belt here. Less so centered over the western U.S., which is why, compared to the ECMWF, this forecast remains more concerning for myself. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching, and Eric will be back with you tomorrow.